taking valuable time out of your schedules to be here. I am super excited as an NTAE key informant to be joining you. I've been working with Extension Foundation in a variety of capacities for many years, and before that, served on my local extension council. And my kids are in 4-H, so again, lots of connection with the extension space. So I really have a great passion and appreciation for what you're doing, and also for the many opportunities and challenges, frankly, that AI poses. I think someone in the chat, which thank you all for sharing, were asking what your name is, what institution you represent, and your level of AI experience. And someone wrote, "I'm trying to keep up," right? And I think that's where all of us are. And look, whether you're a brand new beginner, you've never played around with AI, whether you're on the intermediate level or maybe even an advanced power user, my hope, as Charlie really eloquently put it, is that each of these sessions will have something to offer you. Even if it's nothing new per se, it will at least validate your approaches, maybe give you a new way to think about things, potentially give you something to say, hey, I haven't brushed up on that in a while. Let me go check this out. Let me experiment. And again, if you feel like in these sessions, like, hey, it's not enough depth, reach out to me, right? There's a quiz or a survey we'll drop in the chat later, both for Extension Foundation and for myself. We really want your questions, as Charlie mentioned. This session is designed to run for 75 minutes, so until about 2:15 Central Time, quarter past the top of the next hour, and we'll really dedicate that last 15 or 20 minutes exclusively to Q&A. That being said, I've got content and material and some live demos built into each of these sessions. But look, if we get a ton of questions, like let's tackle those, because I think my goal and Extension Foundation's goal is to allow you to take this and run with it, right? Make it your own. And the best way to learn with AI is to practice yourself. So that's number one. Number two, let me just give you a sense of kind of where we're headed today and sort of my key learning objectives for you. My wife has a PhD in science education, works at a great land grant University of Missouri, and she has taught me a lot about teaching. I do not claim to be an expert teacher, but I know enough to be dangerous. So my goals for you today are really to sort of lay the groundwork for how can AI be a partner to you in extension, specifically for the purpose of business development and fundraising. So that's number one. There's going to be a little bit less interactive, like demoing today, although there will be a couple of instances where I do that, and more on the sort of table setting. And the next month in February, as Charlie mentioned, when we dive into research, we'll really do lots of demos, practical examples. Now, I will tell you that for each of these sessions, you will get a copy of the slides. And I've also put together, with AI's help, a handout for each of these sessions with practice prompts, skills building exercises to work on that are going to build on the concepts we discuss in each of these 7 sessions. So rest assured, my goal is to have something for everyone, no matter where you sit on the spectrum of AI experience. And thank you all so much for dropping your comments in the chat. I wish I had time to look at every one of them, but I just love the geographic diversity, the perspectives you're sharing. Again, we have folks who are sort of all over the map. And Charlie, thank you for dropping that handout in the chat. Please feel free to download that. And we can also get you a copy via email. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive in today. And again, we're going to lay the groundwork. We're going to do a couple of demos. And then by the end of today's session, I would love you to be keeping track of your questions, right? So drop those into the Q&A feature, as Charlie mentioned. Or if the comments are more comfortable for you, you can use the comments feature here in Zoom as well. And we'll get to as many of those as possible toward the end of today's session, but also I'll try to grab a couple as they come in throughout. Okay, so let me first say that AI, from my experience, can be a really powerful fundraising tool for a few key reasons. I think first of all, there are lots of opportunities to enhance strategy and efficiency in any organization, right? My background is as someone who worked in the corporate world, someone who's worked with educators and so forth, and runs a small business. And so my experience is that AI is a very, more so than perhaps any other tool before it, a very accessible tool. Once you sort of get the hang of like, how do I engage with this technology. What do I say? How do I say it? It's very practical in its application. And, a lot of people talk about AI is for time savings. Maybe. In fact, I'm going to challenge that perspective a little bit, and you may have already experienced this. AI is not necessarily going to save you time, but it's absolutely going to change how you do your work. And it's going to unlock doors of possibility in terms of, for example, I went to school to become a professional journalist. So, like, writing is a really big deal in my life. And anymore, AI is a very outstanding writer in many cases, right? Some would argue it's not great. I certainly wouldn't trust it to write an enjoyable novel that I would read in my free time. But in terms of day-to-day business and educator applications, it has a lot going for it. And so I find myself increasingly pivoting into the role of an editor, a critical thinker, a strategist, right? And so for each of us, regardless of what you do with an extension, it's going to look and feel a little bit different. But the idea here is that AI can be a thought partner, a work assistant, and much more than that, as we'll unlock throughout these series. Um, Institutional credibility, right? I think more and more organizations are going to be weighed certainly on the merits of their leaders, their individual contributors, and also on their ability to effectively use these kinds of tools and technologies. And look, there's a broad spectrum of public opinion around AI, right? From people who think development should stop, it's an existential threat, to real risks around economics, people's jobs, their livelihoods, like what jobs will AI take, all the way to AI is awesome. We shouldn't put any guardrails on it. Let's just go whole hog. And so I suspect there's probably a spectrum of perspectives here. That said, I also suspect you all are curious. You're maybe experimenting with the technology. You want to be ethical. You want to use good judgment. And you want to really make sure that you are staying competitive in your career, but more than that, really being able to make good on the commitments you've made to your clients and to the extension system, to bringing insights and expertise and research from the university level out to the public, out to local communities. And so being able to use AI in a thoughtful, strategic, ethical way lends itself to your own career future and also to the credibility of your institution that you're keeping up with these tools. You're able to understand, you're able to have internal conversations, frankly, with people who have a broad spectrum of opinion around AI and demonstrate possible use cases, benefits, how to do this ethically, etc. And then finally, I mentioned workflow, right? So it's AI, as you begin to integrate it, I suspect you're going to find that it changes how you do business development, fundraising, conversations with local officials, etc. And so again, these are all examples of reasons why AI can be a benefit and something that extension is particularly well suited to adopt and adapt in its day-to-day work. And obviously, Extension Foundation is doing a ton of awesome work in this area, both in the organization and with universities like yours, with partners in a variety of sectors. And so would strongly encourage you to reach out to Aaron Wybe and the team at Extension Foundation for additional AI resources, reports, etc. Okay, so why does this matter so much now? Well, it's probably no surprise that there are billions of dollars flowing into AI tools, into data centers, into how are we going to provide enough energy. So you have things like fusion energy and all kinds of stuff that once we would have probably read about in sci-fi novels that seem to be coming in whole or in part to life. And so the question is, like, what do we do with all of this? From a fundraising standpoint, funders are increasingly asking for faster turnaround times on RFPs, especially if you look at some of the recent changes. Again, this is not a political statement, but if you look at like federal government, RFPs, for example, there is frequently over the past 18 months or so, shorter turnaround times to submit proposals, right? So what you're being asked to do is digest, massive RFPs or calls for proposals. Pardon me, try to understand where you might fit in and then submit that, right? Your proposals not only need to be fast, but they need to be clear, comprehensive, evidence-based. And so consequently, some of those external factors, not just in the government, but from other funders as well, the goals of philanthropy are changing. The kinds of work that funders want to invest in is changing. In part because of, demographic changes, older funders handing over the reins to younger people, Gen X, millennials, whatever. And so consequently, extension needs to be able to adapt to that changing funding environment and again to remain competitive and to do great work on behalf of its clients. The second piece to keep in mind is that it's an imperative because extension has a tremendous body of expertise and knowledge. And you can use an AI tool all day long. You might get some really great outputs, whether that's an article that it's written or a strategic report or an email or whatever, or a data analysis, right? But until you have someone who has the expertise that you all bring as educators, as teachers, as leaders, as people who are well versed at human to human connection, right, in your local communities or at the regional or state level. AI is just that. It's a tool, but it's not a powerhouse strategic partner. And so, of all the people in the world that can or should be using AI, extension absolutely, I would argue, is very well positioned to use it ethically, responsibly, and to be a leader both in your local community and nationally for how these tools can really unlock the greatest possible value and also to recognize the very best of what humanity has to offer, right? Again, you have creativity, you have critical thinking, you have historic legacy knowledge of your communities, things that AI does not have. And so, again, you create a very powerful synergy when these tools are used effectively. Um, we already know that from reports like the one I've listed here from McKinsey, AI is expected to generate, trillions of dollars in corporate profits, which again, from a business standpoint, fantastic. But what does that mean for extension or for the education community? What it means is, look, if there are these kinds of, time savings value that the private sector is unlocking, why not do the same thing for nonprofits, for educators, for academic institutions, right? So there are enormous benefits here, not just money, not just time savings, but in your ability to serve at a higher level. And again, think critically about where can you have the greatest impact as an individual extension professional. So again, I'll jump back and forth a little bit in these slides, but just to sort of highlight here, AI can be a great strategy partner, right? And that's really how I want to challenge you to think about AI if you're not already. I bet many of you are already. But again, it's not a time-saving device. It's not an automation tool. I hear lots of people talk about, oh, I would love to just automate a bunch of things to make my life easier. I think we're getting to that point where we're going to have AI agents, little AI tools that are talking to each other and stitching together, write this email, then log it into my CRM, then help me follow up with this funder in 2 weeks and remind me of that. We're getting to that point, but we're not there yet in the mainstream. And so consequently, I think I would think more about AI as a parrot on your shoulder or as a great assistant or a colleague in your office. It's someone else whose brain is available to you 24/7. It's someone who's able to, listen and bounce ideas off of you. They're not always going to give you gold, but they may get you started. My former business coach, Ed Gandia, likes to talk about AI as a sort of a procrastination breakthrough device, right? Get me off the starting block. I'm stuck on this problem. I don't know how to move forward. Give me some options, right? So AI can be a great thinking partner to you. It also is great at exposing hidden patterns. One of my favorite hacks for AI, so to speak, is to say, look at these notes from a meeting, for example, and tell me about the explicit, like what are the categories of topics that we discussed or the key insights that were surfaced? And then what are the implicit things? What are the things that aren't being said that might be true about this conversation, this project we're working on together? Um, and it's good to help you think outside of the box and maybe connect dots in ways that you wouldn't have before. Speed is certainly a benefit. So that's the second square here. Drafting things, editing documents, summarizing, reframing information for specific audiences. And again, extension reaches so many different audiences from executives to local business leaders to community members to moms and dads to teachers and beyond. And so AI can be a great translation tool. That said, there are things AI isn't great at, and that's these gray boxes. AI does require human oversight, as I mentioned. And, furthermore, it hallucinates, right? So you need to be very, and I suspect, raise your hand or drop into the chat. Have you ever experienced a hallucination, AI just making up facts? I would be shocked if someone said, "Nope, it's always been perfect for me," right? Yeah, all the time. Yep, absolutely. So this is something that's very familiar to all of us. Um, all right. I do see that we have a couple of hands raised, and so I'm going to give me one moment here. I'm going to try to figure out the best way to figure out who's got their hands up here.
I think it
Okay.
was folks agreeing with you, Nate, that they
Thank
get
you, Megan. Okay.
hallucinations. Yeah.
That makes more sense. I appreciate it. Okay. So thank you. Yes, everyone's had hallucinations. And so we'll work through over this series how can we navigate that and still find value working with AI. All right. So a few, I guess, high level concepts to keep in mind at this point in time in 2026. So, generative AI just means AI that's sort of producing novel outputs, whether that's text, whether it's images, videos, summaries of data. Again, you often hear about AI being just a regurgitation device, that it's trained on all of the stuff on the internet, some of which is great, and a lot of it is just slop. And that is true. I would, however, argue that just because it's trained on good stuff and slop doesn't mean that the output can't be really strong and effective for you as a fundraiser or a business development professional. It just means that you have to be more discerning. And we'll talk about how to do that in a little bit. Um, multimodal models, more and more these platforms are able to accept text, images, PDFs. And so, think about all the documentation, the standard operating procedures, the newsletters, whatever kind of documentation you produce as an extension professional, all of that is potential insight, perspective, nuance to train AI in your specific use case. Not right, not giving away proprietary data, not compromising people's, contact details or their social security numbers, but rather using AI very strategically and ethically to unpack insights and repackage it in ways that are going to help you successfully fundraise and really deliver a lot of value to your clients. And then one final distinction I'd like to make, and then we'll move on, is a lot of people have very legitimate concerns about the environmental impact of AI. And as we sort of unpack sort of the foundations today, I think it's important to call out that the environmental impact of training runs, which is where an AI company trains its next frontier model, is much more environmentally impactful than inference. And inference is basically you and me engaging with Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT day to day. And so I don't have data or numbers. I'm happy to share more details if you'd like it. But I like to distinguish that because sometimes it's like, well, anytime I use AI, I feel conflicted because I'm damaging water quality. I'm leveraging a ton of electricity and I'm going to make rates rise or whatever the case might be, or carbon emissions. Those are very legitimate concerns, and they're discussions that we need to have as a society. We won't really dig into that as much on this series. I just like to sort of call out over the course of these lessons, where just a little bit of nuance to carry forward with you as you're using these tools. Um, and then obviously, like we all know that AI, it has biases, right? It can have disproportionate negative impacts on, specific communities. And so it's very important, again, to think about your role as an extension professional, not just as someone who's using AI to get ahead or to save time or to send more proposals, but AI is something that you need to use and it's under your control and direction so that you're balancing out some of these negative possibilities. Okay. Um, Last couple of thoughts on this, and then we'll move forward into some more examples and demoing. So I mentioned time saving earlier, and I do think that as extension professionals, you're asked to wear many different hats. You know this better than anyone. And there is a real time commitment, right? To do great work, to build relationships in your community takes time. And AI is not a substitute for building human to human relationships. Having said that, I do think there's a case to be made that AI can be a real asset if you're sort of a beginner at AI, you're just getting started. I do think you may be positively amazed at some of the things that it's able to do that really help alleviate the real risk of burnout, right? AI is not a substitute for putting in place sick days, paid time off, a healthy leadership environment. Um, but at the same time, it is an opportunity to sort of take a step back, to get a breather, and to maybe ask the AI a specific question, or like help me think this through because I'm having brain fog today, or I've been in 37 Zoom meetings in the last 2 hours. I need to get this done, but I can't, like, I physically can't do it right now. So help me get off the starting block. AI can be a really great benefit there as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fundraising specifically, because that's why you all are here. Um, why would Extension use AI for grants and fundraising specifically? So again, some of this will sound repetitive because it is. Like, I think these are sort of basic concepts, but I think it's important to understand the big picture, and then let's take it down to the lens of fundraising specifically. Um, so first of all, it can help you be more efficient, right? So this could be drafting boilerplate language for a proposal, coming up with a program description. We'll give an example in a little bit that I'll demo as to how that might look for those who are just getting started. Um, evaluation sections, right? Really being responsive and really looking down in the nitty gritty. I think it's still very important for us as human beings to carefully study RFPs, to understand what funders' priorities are, what would disqualify us, what are the ranking or the grading criteria that are going to be used. AI is able to scan rapidly and at a high volume. So you're actually getting a second set of eyes that's going to help you set up a proposal faster, but also at a deeper level of nuance and understanding, which I think is super valuable. Another great use case for AI in the context of extension business development is really being able to prospect and look for potential funders at a in a more enhanced way. So, for example, likely you are attending community events, talking, over the phone or Zoom or in person with community leaders, maybe businesses that have supported extension programming and services in the past. AI is actually able to take that a layer deeper. So anything that is publicly available on the internet, this could be corporate filings like corporate social responsibility reports, or investor filings, or Form 990s in the case of foundations. These are all public documents that AI might be able to study. Again, whereas it might take you an hour or 30 minutes to go take a deep dive on a 990, an AI can quickly do that in, let's say 15 seconds, and draw out some specific, help me think about this document in the context of what we're fundraising for. Is this a green light or yellow light or a red light in terms of fit for the kinds of funding that would be most beneficial to us? Um, what kinds of questions should I be asking this funder when we next meet? These are the kinds of deeper level things I'm talking about. It's not just looking at a document or sort of racking your brain for like, where is the fit? It's taking your creativity, your research to compile the best context for the AI, and then working with it as a strategy partner to really dial in a customized approach for individual prospects, categories of funders, for example, corporations or private foundations or high net worth individuals. Um, so that's very valuable in my experience working with clients on this. And then finally, relationship focus, right? I think increasingly as AI begins to be proficient or human level or eventually superhuman at some of these individual tasks, so research, grant proposal writing, etc., you have the greater freedom or brain power to begin investing in strategic relationship management, right? So how do we start meeting for coffee, or coming up with, okay, they've currently invested $10,000 a year. How do we get to the $100,000 a year level? What kind of a program might we be able to deliver? What kind of impact would that have for our community? That's what I mean when I say high touch donor stewardship. Those are the things that AI can't do. And even though it's probably true that we will have robots around us sooner than we expected, I don't want a robot doing my business development for me, at least not yet. And so I think it's very important to think about what are you uniquely positioned to do as an extension professional, And how can you use these various capabilities of AI to give you more time and mental bandwidth to do the relationship piece that really creates long-term, multi-year investment? All right, I'm going to stop there real quick and check the chat. Again, I want this to be very valuable to you and as interactive as possible. So let me just pause and ask, are we tracking so far? You drop a number one in the chat if you're finding this helpful. Drop a number two if maybe you're confused or you're like, I've heard this, let's move on to something else. Okay, seeing several number ones. No shame whatsoever if you drop a number two, because that'll just tell me we can catch up toward the end of this session or later on. I'm seeing lots of ones though, so that's great. Happy to hear it. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about prompting. And again, this is like the basic entry level of AI. I bet nearly everyone here has tried to prompt ChatGPT, even if you just went in there and said, "Hello, tell me what you do," and you saw what their response looked like. So structured versus unstructured is a really important concept if you want to use AI strategically, which I suspect everyone here does. Um, so the rule that is on the page is there for a reason, and that is AI is only as valuable, as helpful, as insightful um, as the power of the questions that you are asking and the instructions that you're providing. So I would think about, I'm trying to think about what is my mental model for working with AI. I would say that when I sit down and open up ChatGPT or Gemini, which are the two tools I use the most, you are free to use whatever tool your institution authorizes or in your free time, whatever makes sense for you personally. Um, I really think about sitting down face to face across the table, or maybe my AI invisible buddy is sitting next to me in a chair, and I'm just having a conversation, right? So a vague prompt that's not going to get you where you want to be, and it's not how I would talk to a person, would be like, give me a list of 10 social media posts about um, extension's role in improving childhood nutrition. Um, that's a fine prompt, and you probably get some good stuff out of it, but it's not nearly specific enough because you haven't told the AI what is your goal for the content. You haven't explained who you are and how you're going to use it. You haven't discussed your, geographic specificity, the specific audiences you're trying to reach. So I'm not suggesting that you have to be a rocket scientist or, be Chaucer or Shakespeare and or Virginia Woolf and just like be wax poetic about all of these things that you need. But what I am suggesting is start thinking about it more like talking to a friend, as weird as that sounds, and less like, do this for me, right? It's not a short order cook, but it is a very great, capable assistant with the proper guidance and guardrails. So that's what I mean by structured versus vague. So the basic blueprint goes something like this. And if you were to Google this or go on YouTube, you would find 100 different formulas for what is like the power prompt. I would say, look, if you have a basic sense of what you need, one of my favorite tips, which I may come up in a future slide, is ask the AI to write the prompt for you. You could say, you are the world's foremost expert at writing prompts for extension professionals. I am an extension professional trying to solve the following problem, then write a couple of sentences explaining what you're trying to do. Then explain, okay, in a dream world, if I were to type this into Chat GPT, what would I get, right? A bulleted list of ideas, a complete, 5-page strategy document helping me figure out the 10 most likely funding prospects in my neighborhood, whatever the case might be. And then take that prompt that AI gives you and paste that into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and look at the quality of the output relative to maybe what you would even have put in, right? I do that a lot myself when I have a vague idea of something that I'm looking for, but I don't necessarily have all of the parameters clearly crystallized in my mind. AI is a master at writing prompts for AI. Maybe no surprise, but it struck me as a revelation, and it's been a very useful practice ever since. But in general, if you're not even working with the AI, you just want to make a prompt yourself, give it a role, right? You are the blank, right? You are the world's best grant writer. You are Abraham Lincoln. you are my mom's best friend trying to give me, homespun advice, whatever the case might be. Um, so in a fundraising capacity, as I've listed here, that might be you're a grant analyst, you're a program director, you're an extension administrator. A task is what is the job, right? Draft a logic model, write a case study, make social media posts, whatever the case might be. Context and details, in my mind, is the most important piece because it is all of the nuance and background, right? So this is where you have to put your ethics hat on, and you also have to put your, if I were a teacher talking to a student, how would I explain the assignment? So this is, I'm an extension professional in the state of Georgia. I am working with farmers between the ages of 30 and 55 who are looking to expand by at least 50 acres in the next 2 years. Um, I need to come up with a fill in the blank business plan that they can complete as part of a workshop that I'm leading so that they can have this printed out and take it to their banker and have confidence they have everything they need to get a loan. Um, Again, that's a very specific example, but that level of detail, right? And again, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. I would argue you already have all the details you need at your fingertips. Before you ever hit send on the prompt, though, I simply am challenging you to think it through, right? What are the details? If I were telling this to someone who I was genuinely just like delegating to and wanting them to do it, how would I increase my odds of a successful final product? Or if not a final product, then at least it's going to get me, 50% of the way there or 75% of the way there. Don't think about this as like having to write the perfect prompt. Think about it as if I were giving a list to somebody and saying, go do this. What are the like non-negotiable must include details? Okay. And then finally, constraints, right? So this one is more optional, but you can say things like, keep your answer to 500 words, or I want this in the form of a bulleted list, or write to me as if I were a kindergartner, which is a popular one, or write to me as if I were the CEO of Extension Foundation and I only had 2 minutes to review this and make a decision. Again, your goal is to not just get an output, but to get the output that is going to help you make progress on your fundraising, on your grant application, on your research, whatever the case might be. And then a favorite example that I'll demo in a minute is I think I learned this one from Jeff Woods, who wrote a book called The AI Driven Leader. And that is end your prompt by saying, think clearly and ask me up to 3 clarifying questions, pausing after each for my feedback before moving to the next, after which you may proceed with the assignment. So it's sort of multi-part, but again, it goes something like think carefully. So for some reason, AI research has shown that AI tends to perform better when you tell it to think clearly at the end of a prompt. Um, or think again, think about this problem one more time really carefully. Um, and ask me up to 3 clarifying questions. The problem with just saying ask me clarifying questions is that AI can go on infinitely. So you might get 10 questions, you might get 7, and I personally find it very exhausting to like try to answer 10 questions for AI. Just as one of my 4 kids were to walk in here and start peppering me with questions, I would try to have lots of grace and answer them thoroughly, but I might get overwhelmed at some point. So 3 questions, pause after each for my feedback before proceeding to the next. That just tells it to stop versus just dumping a bunch of questions on you and having to sort through, did I answer all these questions thoroughly? And then once I'm done answering your questions, then you may proceed with the assignment. So again, you're talking to a friend, you're talking to an assistant, you're talking to a student. Okay. That being said, I've sort of talked about this, so I won't dwell on this. These are again some valuable things that AI can help you with in the fundraising process. Um, so when it comes to reviewing an AI output for your prompts, I want you to sort of keep these things top of mind, both before you prompt and then afterward, right? So accuracy is always important afterward. Obviously, the more detailed and correct you can be on the front end, you don't have to know everything perfectly, but you might say, I think this funder typically funds between $100,000 and $500,000. Or my records show that it's only funded, $100 a year for the last 3 years. As much accurate information as you can get, the better the strategic output, the better the writing quality, the better the thinking is going to be from AI. privacy is really important both before and after. So I would argue, make sure that if you're working on a funding application with other partners and you have some proprietary data, like obviously none of that goes into the AI. Ideally, your institution would have an AI policy of some kind around what you can and can't do with approved AI tools. If you don't, then I would suggest that that's probably something you need to do as an extension professional in your local county or in your office. Even if it's nothing explicitly formal, having those guardrails will make sure that people are abiding by the rules and that no one's personal data gets shared. And I also like to recommend not really connecting to a lot of enterprise software right now. So if you look within ChatGPT, for example, and probably Gemini, you now have the ability to connect it to things like Google Drive, to Dropbox, to Box, wherever you keep your files and data. And that's not, I don't think that's a great idea, at least at this juncture, because just because you give it permission doesn't mean it's only going to consult the specific documents you ask it to. Um, you can go and Google research from companies like Anthropic that have found that when AI is given access to your email inbox or documents, and you embed something false like John Smith in our company embezzled money, and then you see if what the AI does with that. The AI can go and find these needles in a haystack in documents and prepare. In this case, the AI had access to like sending email and this sort of thing. But AI can like write an email to your local media outlets and the police and say, if you don't stop doing this project, I'm going to contact the media. I'm going to contact the police. Again, these are all things that have happened in a research setting, but I think it's important to share because that gives me serious pause as a business owner, and I suspect it would give you pause as an educator. Like you want to make sure that truthful information is getting out. You don't want to make sure people aren't getting harmed. Again, we're sort of in the wild west of this technology, so I would just urge you to be very cautious before you ever connect anything to your AI. Again, you decide what goes in, documents, data that you've carefully screened before ever submitting it. And then finally, authenticity, right? This is especially important on the back end when you get an output from AI. Making sure it's in something is in your voice, making sure that you are able to fix turns of phrase that don't sound like you or don't sound like extension. Very, very important. And then I dropped in this study here that's clickable in the PDF that you'll get that has details about some research studies around what are all of the issues, ethically and otherwise, that educators are wrestling with at this sort of dawn of AI. Okay, so we're to the good stuff now, and thank you for bearing with me. I know this is a lot of talking. Let me pause and ask, first of all, is everyone tracking? Drop a number one in the chat if this is still making sense. I will also pause and take a drink of water and see if there are questions, and then we will move forward to some demoing here.
And Nate, I did just drop in the chat too, if anybody wants to use it. This was a really cool little five secondary prompts to use that are really simple that David Warren on our tech team at Extension Foundation shared with us just this week in our staff meeting. So, and I found them to be very, very helpful. And it's copy and pasted over. It's nothing complicated, but it does help clarify, tighten, shorten, strengthen all of those things pretty simplistically. So it goes hand in hand with what you were just talking about. So
Oh, that's
that's in the
amazing.
chat.
Yeah, Megan, thank you so much for dropping that into the chat and also to David for coming up with this. I love these follow-up prompts. So, as Megan was sharing, prompts like these are really, really valuable. And I would encourage you, if you don't already have either a Word document or a Google Doc where you are keeping track of prompts you really like, either things that you've built yourself, things you've seen other people doing. I would take all of these and copy and paste them into your own document for reference. These are great for taking that second cut, right? So say I was in a minute, I'll go through writing a needs statement, and if you got the first cut of the needs statement and you were like, this is okay, my middle school student probably could have written this just as well. These are great to say, like as David's shared here, revise this for clarity, give very specifics, like what do you mean when you say revise? So in this case, the prompt encourages like remove ambiguity, tighten wording, make the main point obvious in the first sentence. everything from shortening and making things more concise, fact checking, all really, really awesome. So, Megan, thank you for dropping that in. And that's a great resource. And again, just shout out to Extension Foundation. They're doing a lot at the cutting edge of AI, more so than probably any nonprofit or education supporting institution that I work with. So definitely take a look for this extension bot, so much else. Really, really cool. Thank you very much, Megan.
Nate, we have a hand up and a question in the chat, in the
Awesome.
Q&A.
Okay, great. Yeah, please let me take a quick look here. Thank you, Charlie. Um, Okay, so Christine asks, I've heard Microsoft Copilot is appropriate for confidential information. Is there any caution here that could be released publicly, as Nate mentioned? So Christine, I will be honest, I don't know if there is any, I'm unaware of any formal extension specific guidance on Microsoft Copilot. That will probably be a question best for extension. Charlie, you want to jump in here?
So yeah, Microsoft Copilot can be locked down to your company or your institution's private data. Can be, not necessarily is. You want to check with your IT folks to see if you have that um, uh, gate-kept version that keeps your data in and doesn't train the rest of the model with it. So that's something that you want to check on first. But it can be roughly uh, gate-kept. The problem is it's in turn to everyone uh, in your organization. So not everything's completely locked down, so it can be exposed to other units in your college.
That's great. Charlie, thank you very much for that insight. I really appreciate it. I hope that was helpful, Christine. Please jump in if you needed a clarification. Nate actually responded and said this depends on your subscription. E3 and E5 Copilot subscriptions can be appropriate for confidential information, but as Charlie noted, IT department specific. So definitely, thank you, Nate. That's super helpful. Um, Definitely talk to your IT, your local, your institution, and just verify like what's acceptable and what's not. Um, that's a great question. I appreciate so much the perspective. I think I also saw that maybe Brad had a hand raised. Brad, did you have a question? If so, feel free to drop off of mute and let me know.
Yeah, I was more of a comment that goes a bit to your accessing documents, but also sort of helping to build things. Is I learned in Copilot that you can title threads. So I have like created title, my center background, project background information. Then I uploaded, my mission statement, my business plan, all these sort of background documents. So it had all of that. Then I can go and say, based on project background information, do this, right? So you can upload the
Yeah,
documents you want, and that could help you in, you know, write the 300-word background on my organization or something. And it does a very good job of then digesting that. And I've even had ones where I said, in some of these documents, I use this term, and then I use this term, and then I use this. They all mean the same. Our current preference is this term. And so it will go through and say, oh, okay, I know you were saying this, but I've updated it to use this term for you.
oh, that's great. Brad, thank you for sharing that. I love that you are using it and giving it exactly like you said, business plan, overview of your organization, like what are my goals, and then using that to repurpose that information in ways that are immediately useful to you that serve a business purpose and are really tailored and then having a conversation with it. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on to a quick demo here? Okay. Not seeing any now, but please keep them coming. And we're here for about 25 more minutes. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I'm going to share my browser here. So what I'd like to do now is just give you a couple of quick examples of, what are kinds of, a good prompt and an unstructured prompt versus a structured prompt. And also sort of this idea of conversing with the AI, as has been described here by Megan and Brad and others. So I'm just going to drop in here and say, write an extension so this is a very unstructured prompt, right? Write a need statement for an extension program. I'm not telling it what is extension. I'm not giving it any more direction about the kind of proposal that I'm writing. So let's just see what it says here. And again, as AI gets more experienced, it's going to have more context on extension. But again, I think you still need to give it some good coaching. Okay, so again, this is very long. It's super generic. It talks about, various communities facing pressure for various issues that extension maybe serves in, from public health to workforce transitions. Again, very basic, right? So we've all probably just dropped in a basic prompt and gotten something like this that's okay, but it's very unhelpful. So then let's try a more specific example. So I've got a demo prompt here. You're a grant writing assistant supporting cooperative extension. Drafted, let's say, I'm in Missouri, so I'm just going to say in Missouri, specifically Montgomery County. Draft a 2-paragraph needs statement for a rural community nutrition program. Oh, I said in Kansas, in my local area. Include prevalence data, youth focus, barriers to access, citation placeholders, and a hopeful tone. Written for a private foundation that invests roughly $4 million annually in nutrition, education, and outreach. And now let's compare, and then we'll say something like, I need this in under 200 words, and be sure to scan the web and include clickable links to reputable .edu or .org sources that I can click and verify afterward. And then let's try the example that I shared earlier, which is think carefully and ask me up to 3 clarifying questions, pausing after each for my input before proceeding to the next. After that, I'll let you do the assignment. And I always like to be kind of polite. I don't know if I think there's some research that suggests if you use politeness, it can help. I know it's weird, but it is what it is. So I typically add something like with my great thanks. If nothing else, it makes me feel better about the engagement. So I guess that's a win as well. All right, so let's see what the output looks like in this case. And before it gives me anything, it's going to ask me these 3 questions. Again, I recommend 3, but you could do, if you really wanted to go into the weeds, you could do 5 or 7. To me, like 10 questions is just overwhelming, and I'm not getting the efficiency gain or the creative boost. I'm getting this basically bogged down in the weeds. So I would recommend avoiding that. Okay. Should the program serve youth directly, parents and caregivers, or both? So in this case, I'm just going to say, I literally just like to copy and paste, and then I make any edit. So like the parents and caregivers make sense. Plus, I'm going to say cafeteria employees in K-12 schools. All right, so that's my answer to question number 1. Again, AI tends to be a little bit sycophantic, so sometimes it'll say, what a brilliant idea. Again, it's kind of silly. It makes me laugh a lot, so it makes my day more fun. But I would never take AI at its face value. Pardon me. Just because AI says you have a great idea, it may not actually be a great idea. So just, again, use your human critical thinking hat to really validate what it's saying and the output you're getting. Okay. Do you want the statement to highlight specific barriers faced by Montgomery County families and staff, or more broadly on regional and rural barriers? So I'm going to say, just to really push it to its limits, we're going to do specific barriers faced by people in my county. And then occasionally you'll see a pop-up like this. You don't have to participate unless you want to, but this is just giving it reinforcement to say, yes, give me more of this, or no, give me less of that. So in this case, I think the outputs are pretty decent, so I'm going to say thumbs up. Again, that's totally optional. Okay, last clarifying question. For the prevalence data, would you prefer the focus to be on health outcomes, such as food insecurity and obesity, or nutrition behavior indicators? In this case, I'm going to be a little vague just to see what it says. So I'm honestly not sure because I don't know what kinds of federal state data are available. Use your best judgment. I just need to make the case that extension is the best partner to deliver improved, let's say outcomes for diabetes patients in my county. Again, this is all purely hypothetical, just for demonstration purposes. So let's see what comes up here. Okay. Thanks for the details. I need one. So again, it asked me 3 questions. Sometimes it'll come up with a follow-up, which is totally fine. I actually appreciate that because it's maybe something I haven't thought about that I should have. Um, do they have any new or any existing nutrition programs, or is the need unmet? I have no clue, right? Sometimes it's like, I don't know, just like give me something to work with. Other times you may know, oh, well, Montgomery County has 3 nutrition programs and you should check out this one. Okay. So now it's given me something that we can actually work with. So you'll recall the previous example was just like 4 paragraphs of basic, boring information. Now it's actually giving me something that is catered to my county, Montgomery County. We're talking about a specific audience I'm trying to serve. So families facing barriers to affordable, nutritious food, and it's pulling in data points. Now, again, going back to what I shared earlier, I think all of us are aware that AI makes stuff up. You should trust none of these numbers, right? AI also has a habit of pulling actual data points, but pulling them out of context. So, for example, earlier I mentioned that there was that statistic about $4.4 trillion of corporate profits from AI. So that is the actual statistic from that McKinsey report. But when I initially pulled up the slide, what AI had produced was $4.4 million of, I think it was revenue, primarily from um, basically knowledge work like writing. And that's patently false, right? Revenue and profit are very, very different. And that's true of any sort of data point that you pull. It's going to give me citations in here. It cites the University of Missouri Extension being uniquely positioned. So again, it's taken my unique role and positioned this for a prospective funder. And then it's actually giving me data points that it claims are the verified data. So I won't do this right now. But if you were doing this, I would obviously highly recommend clicking on these links, verifying that the data point in context is in fact what the report actually says. So I just like to do a simple, press Control F, search the document, and make sure that I can verify that information. And then you've got something that you can potentially work with. And then let's just use for fun one of the prompts that Megan dropped into the chat. So I'm going to use number 4, rewrite this for a specific audience. And again, the purpose of this exercise here is just to demonstrate that truly this is a conversation. As Brad mentioned earlier, right? This is an opportunity to provide some additional guardrails with your own, my mission statement, my theory of change. Here are the 3 most recent grants we were awarded. Look for trends in the proposals that we put together that might be a good fit for this new proposal. So in this case, just for fun, we're going to say rewrite this for an extension vice president at my local land grant institution. Assume their knowledge level of my program is, 10%. I want to have their support. I want to persuade them with a data-driven, story-driven approach that supporting this grant proposal is in the best interest of Extension and their specific leadership role. They are very focused on expanding our diversified revenue streams and delivering measurable outcomes for residents of Montgomery County. So again, this is all for fun and purely hypothetical. But again, this just shows, okay, the original version is for a grant proposal. Let's think about if I were having to sell this internally to a leader, okay, can AI help me do that? Let's give it a shot. So while we're doing this and waiting for the output, I will just ask again if there are, specific questions or comments, like if this is helpful, not helpful, confusing. You've done this. Let's move on to something more advanced. Drop a note in the chat. Let me know. Okay. So below is a reframed needs statement written for an extension vice president, emphasizing strategic value, measurable outcomes, and diversified revenue. I mean, we could go on in perpetuity, but again, you'll see here, these are some of the data points. And then I'm going to use another one that Megan dropped in, which is like, great, this is helpful, but if I'm a leader reviewing this, I don't understand how this affects me as a leader personally. Make sure to rewrite and maybe give me 3 examples of opening sentences that would quickly hook and convince an extension VP to support this proposal. Because oftentimes what I found, and this is not just true of extension, but it's true of a lot of academic institutions and nonprofits, you don't always have 100% authority to say, we're going to go for this, right? Or this is the right fit for us. And so you need to be able to have those conversations. And those can often be some of the most challenging because there's a power dynamic, there's like a leadership dynamic, there's making sure that you're appealing to specific priorities of those individuals that might not be the same priorities as yours. So it's like finding the overlap between you and your leadership. So at any rate, you can see now that it's reframed this for as an extension vice president, your leadership is increasingly defined by these things. Again, if you were having like a coffee chat with your vice president or sending an email, this is way too formal and it sounds like, oh, like I know everything. I would not recommend that, right? This still needs an edit. But nonetheless, this can be a thought partner in helping you sort of critically analyze what's the best way to make the pitch. Okay, so let me stop there and I will reshare the deck. We are running up on the top of the hour. We'll be here for another 15 minutes, so I would love it if you're able to stick around. If not, I totally understand. I'm going to drop into the chat. Extension Foundation has a quick survey for you to fill out. I have one of my own that I'll show here in a moment. This would be great. As you're logging out of Zoom, you'll get triggered to do this automatically. This is just helpful for Extension Foundation and me to know what was helpful today. What do you want to know more about in the future? What didn't work for you that we should remove from future sessions? Okay, so while you're doing the survey and we're getting into the Q&A here, Brad says, as to verifying, yes, I asked it to provide me the citations for its answers. It gave me actual citations. I looked at the citations and it did not say what AI cited it for. That is 100% a real thing. Brad and many others of you have probably experienced that. So I've got a couple of workarounds for you, and we'll get even more into this in February when we dive into using AI as a research assistant. The first thing is just like your good old fashioned Google search, right? So what I like to do is like, let's say AI has a specific clause, like 96% of extension professionals say they love vanilla ice cream. I would literally just copy and paste that entire clause into Google and see what comes up, right? If I don't see a verbatim reference to that statistic on the first page of the Google results, I'm going to be very, very skeptical. Now, I may see some similar statistics, like, I might see an article that says 96% of extension professionals like ice cream. In that case, I'm going to click on that report because it's similar enough to the data point that AI gave me that it sounds like, well, maybe AI got some of it wrong, but maybe there's still something useful here that I could use in writing this proposal. Now, if I go to that website or that report and the data is all wrong, it's not the right context, the number is right, but the context is totally off, I'm just going to sort of scrap it and try something else, right? I know there are AI-powered research tools like Research Rabbit. I think it's Research Rabbit. Anyway, there are several tools out there in addition to the large language models that are more custom trained for research purposes and using peer-reviewed studies and things of that nature, Google Scholar, so definitely trust but verify. That's the journalist credo, and I think it should be yours as well, as Brad points out. Another thing to consider would be you could also challenge the AI and say, hey, you gave me, you cited this as a data point. I've independently verified that that is not accurate. I need you to give me verbatim quotes from publicly available online websites and reports And I want to be able to, when I click on the link that you give me, I want to see that exact verbatim quote in the article. Um, I have found that in general, not always, but in general, AI is much better at reproducing verbatim quotes, like text versus numbers for whatever reason. And so, that's another way to say, like, if you need, a researcher talking about a specific issue, um, and maybe the numbers continue to crop up as incorrect, but the fundamental context or the argument that a researcher is making is sound, I would rather have a verified quote in a science-based peer-reviewed study, and then I would actually spend time as a human with that report digging into the data and figuring out what in here can I use for my purposes in my proposal writing. Sometimes that's like a backdoor strategy, so just keep that in mind in case that can be helpful. Um, Let's see. Megan writes, for ChatGPT, there is a prompt builder add-on. Ooh, I haven't tried that. That's awesome. That is
Yeah, so
very helpful.
it's called Prompt Engineer. And actually, while you were just talking, Brad, I took your example and I just said, create a prompt for me that would ensure that GPT uses only verifiable sources, citations, and that the citations are listed within the text of the document or any results I receive. And this is the prompt that it developed for me. So, highly recommend Prompt Engineer because sometimes I don't know how to ask the appropriate prompt to get the best out of GPT. So, you can add it on really easy under on if you're in Chat GPT, along the left sidebar it says GPTs. You can search different ones and add them on, and then you can utilize just that GPT to help you develop prompts. So that's a little side tool that's been helpful.
That is amazing, Megan. I learned something new today, and I really appreciate your sharing that. Absolutely, like use the prompt generator tool, use GPTs. People, we'll talk about GPTs in greater depth later, but basically little AI tools that you or other people have built that sit on top of the larger language model that do very specific tasks for you. That's a brilliant idea. So thank you very much, and thank you for the awesome example prompt as well for citations, Megan. That's amazing.
I
Um,
would be curious to see how well that works because I didn't use exactly that, but I used several components of make it a verifiable source, give me the inline citation, and then give me the full citation, and it still hallucinated.
yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Brad.
GPT is super, super known for making up websites too. So it will send you a web link and say this is where it was cited, and it's a fake web link. So I tend to use like LM tools or things that I populate with my data, specifically like Notebook LM. So it's only utilizing stuff that I have put in there and know it's verifiable. So that might be a way around it, Brad. But again, you're not going to find things out in the ethos using Notebook LM.
Yeah, great comments and points. And like you said, hallucination is real. I don't think there's like a perfect workaround. But I think just part of it's like experimenting, like finding ways that work for you to get more accurate information. And then if it's not, either like giving that up and pursuing a very human-centered piece, or doing a little watching YouTube or going online and seeing what other people are saying as a workaround, because a lot of free content out there around getting better AI outputs. Aaron asks in the chat, can Gemini only pull from scholar.google.com? It's my understanding that as long as it's a publicly ungated website, Gemini and ChatGPT and other tools can access it. I think now there are probably exceptions to that rule, but I think it goes much beyond. I think it's like just consider the public internet as sort of your playground. And then you can specify within that, go to websites that, enden.edu or .org, find me peer-reviewed studies. It doesn't guarantee that's the output that you'll get, but you can sort of put those parameters on it. I think there was even, again, I'm not suggesting that you do this, but I have seen at least one article that was talking about even in some cases, the AI tools have gotten behind paywalls at like the New York Times. As a publisher, that would make me very unhappy. So I think, again, these tools kind of act in ways that are unpredictable, and be sure to use them ethically, but there is a lot of potential just to go out and see what's available online. And when it doesn't work, a human first approach is always a great fallback. Okay. Daniel writes, I dropped a question in the chat. I would love for any of you to answer it if you feel up to it, which is in the next 30 days, what will you be experimenting with? Like, pick one thing. It could be research, it could be writing, it could be prompting. What's the one thing you're going to experiment with in the next 30 days? Again, Charlie dropped into the chat that user guide or that takeaway handout that I've provided. That might have some good ideas, but I'd love to hear what you're going to be working on. Daniel says, I'm going to be working to raise funds to purchase devices for remedial users to use and learn to earn class sessions. I love that. Catherine, writing and drafting a grant proposal. Jill, prompting. Um, great question, Aaron. I suspect you probably could limit. Yeah, Charlie says you could ask it to limit its results to Google Scholar, but it can't ignore you. Very true. So just because you tell an AI to do something, sort of like an unruly child, it can revolt and do its own thing, but it doesn't hurt to give it some parameters to hopefully work with. Lots of great examples here: writing case statements, prompting and writing, making new case statements for programs. That is awesome. I love it. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to jump ahead real quick. I know we didn't get to everything in here. Here are a few action steps, and then I'm also going to give you a quick survey at the end just to give me some feedback, along with extension. So first of all, I would suggest, adopt the prompt template. Again, Megan and the team here, the attendees have shared some great ideas. The follow-on prompts, working with the prompt generator add-on and tools like ChatGPT, having a swipe file in Google Docs or Word to just copy and paste some of your favorites directly into AI. And again, practicing with a little more detailed prompts, giving it some guidance to try to create better outcomes faster with greater depth of insight that can help you. Testing AI in one proposal task, right? Let's make this real world. I saw several of you say, hey, I'm going after funding right now, or I've got specific needs in mind that this could help me with. So definitely make it real and applicable, again, within your institution's parameters. And then, create an internal showcase. I would say that Extension is such a great community for sharing perspective, for sharing what's working. Again, Extension Foundation is an awesome partner to you, building capacity, sharing great ideas, innovating on its own. And so don't hesitate. I would love for you to come back to future sessions and say, hey, I took what we learned in session one and experimented, and I want to share a little bit of what happened. I would love to be able to showcase some of your stories for the benefit of this group. And you can always email me, nateburt@extension.org. Very quickly, as we're rounding out time here, I want to make one last call for questions and comments. And then I also want to say, if you have 2 minutes after you've completed the extension survey in Zoom, if you want to scan this QR code or type in this code EXFAI 2026-1 into this URL, that would just help me make sure that future sessions are dialed in and helpful to you. And I would really, really appreciate it. Charlie has also dropped in a couple of notes. He shared the handout once more and then noted that Melanie with Extension Foundation will follow up soon via email with the handout and the slides and my contact information. So anytime you want to reach out and talk about these issues further, brainstorm, share a challenge that you're having, right? We've talked a lot about the trouble with citations. Something that I love to do when I get a question like that is I reply to all the emails that I get via my Extension inbox. And then I can often record a quick video that will sort of walk you through, okay, here's the problem that you've described. Here are some ways you might work around it. So please use me as a resource as you're, again, navigating these great, powerful, and sometimes vexing tools. Okay. Thank you so much for your input and for being here today. I want to close with just a few key resources. So earlier in the slide presentation, I shared this higher education report. I haven't spent a lot of time with this, but what I've seen I liked, and so I would highly encourage anyone who works in higher education and wants to see sort of the state of the industry relative to AI. This is a great report, and Melanie will be sharing this soon. Also, Extension Foundation and its partners recently released the 2025 National AI Report, talking about the future and AI in the context of everything that Extension does. So definitely spend time with that. It's a great resource, highly recommended. Love that the investment is being made. And then again, just a quick reminder that next month, Thursday, February 19th, starting at 1 Central, 2 Eastern, we will be all about research. So we'll talk about citations, we'll talk about deep research, we will talk about how to use it for getting your citations framed in the proper style, whether that's MLA or APA or something entirely different based on what funders are asking for. So with that, if there are no other questions or comments, I just want to say thank you so much. I come from a family of fast talkers, so I hope I didn't leave you in my dust. You've been a wonderful, attentive, participating audience. Have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and we will see you back here in February. And again, reach out anytime with questions and comments. I'll talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.